Hi folks, and welcome back to Dungeons and Dry Brushing, to our first video in the new year. I hope you all had a great holiday season, whatever it is you're celebrating, even if you're just celebrating a couple days off of work. Now, as I mentioned in my last video, I'm already in progress on some changes for the channel, which will hopefully make things a little nicer. But that's not what we're here for today. Today we're going to be doing some Cursed City slap chop paint jobs. I still want to get the rest of this set painted up, so this is going to be a great, quick, and effective way to do it. We're going to be working on the Kosargi Nightguard models today. These are some long, dead-looking giant city guards. So we're going to be going with a very worn leather look for their coats, and some rusted metal effects on the weapons. Let's get started. Because I primed the bases on my Cursed City models, the first step is using AK's Wet Earth texture paste. I use a silicone sculpting tool to spread this over the base, avoiding the bottoms of the models. If you do hit them though, you can just brush it off while it's still wet. Spread thin, the basing material doesn't take long to dry. I add grass tufts about 20 minutes later. I do dot my tufts with super glue before putting them down. I know not everyone does, but I like having them just a little more secure. As always, when we're using slap chop, I just prime in black. This is going to give us the darkest shadow color on the models. I follow this up with a heavy dry brush of medium gray, and once that's dry, a lighter dry brush of white. This is what gives us the base for our translucent paints, like contrast paint or speed paint. This underbrushing picks out the volumes and details on the model. The base layer on their coat is a combination of Gryph-hound Orange and Garragax Sewer. I mix these together about 2 to 1 to give us a really orange-brown color, and to keep that bright Gryph-hound Orange from looking too fresh and clean on these moldering undead. The entirety of their long coats get coated in this, just being careful to avoid the cuffs and the leather details. I'm sure some of you watching this are wondering why I didn't do this in sub-assemblies rather than struggling to get this orange paint underneath the weapons and into some of these awkward angles, and the answer is quite simple. The point of slap chop is for quick and effective paint jobs. To me, if you start doing sub-assemblies, then you're missing the point to some degree. Plus, for me, things like sub-assemblies, pinning, those sorts of techniques, while useful at times, they are the least fun part of the hobby. When I include steps like that in a project, I'm less likely to do the project at all. Once I have the base layers down on the coat, I move on to the leather details. These get black Templar contrast, just picking out the cuffs, the belt, and the leather straps all across the front of the coats, as well as their boots. Having added the brown to our orange earlier also prevents this color scheme from looking too much like a Halloween decoration with the black and orange. Next up, I add a simple layer of skeleton horde to the fur around their collars and hats. You'll want to be careful during this step to avoid the long, scraggly beards of the Night Guard. If you get a little bit on the helmet or pauldrons, however, don't worry about it, the metallic paints will cover that up easily. Now it's time to base all of that nasty undead flesh. I do this a bit different every time, to be honest, but on these models I went for a 1-to-1 mix of Plaguebearer flesh and Guilliman flesh. I wanted to go for a rotting, decayed look without making them straight up green. This really just gets applied to the face and hands. Don't worry if you get it on the gums, we're going to recolor those a little bit later. and do make sure to get this in any tears in their coats that you can see flesh through. I decided on Cloudburst Blue speed paint for their pants. You can't see much of the material, and I wanted something that wouldn't steal attention from the brighter parts of the model. Cloudburst is a beautiful desaturated blue that's perfect for that. I decided to use Garagax sewers on the weapon handles. We mixed this with Gryph-hound Orange earlier to get the color for the coats, and it just seemed a good way to keep the color tones similar. Plus, it's just a really nice brown, despite the name. Their scraggly, undead ZZ Top beards get a simple coat of Runic Grey speed paint. This is a blue-gray that looks great as hair. Finally, it's time to start on the rust effect on their weapons. You may have seen this before on my channel. I love the simplicity of this effect as well as the finished result. I start by base coating all of the rusted metal in Rhinox hide, but of course any dark brown would do. In this case, we're just using it on the blade of the Bardiche weapon he's using. Once that's dry, I use bright orange riser rust to dry brush and stipple over the entire surface of the rusted weapon. You do want to be careful during this step not to get that orange anywhere else. That's why I'm using an old brush with the majority of the bristles cut off for this part. It just gives finer control over the dry brushing. Next step is to use Proacryl's Dark Silver on the blade of the Bardiche. I just use the tip of the brush and take light strokes inward from the edge of the blade, like the rust was scraped off in combat by the clash of steel against steel, rather than being deliberately repaired. While I have this out, I also base coat the other metallics on the model. The helmet and pauldron, the belt buckle, the details on the leather straps, and the keyring that one of them is holding. With those dry, I come back in with Proacryl Bright Silver and highlight all of those areas. On the blade, I repeat the exact same process. Tiny brush strokes inward from the edge of the blade, but I only use it to cover about 50% of the previous silver layer. Everything else gets a rough, sketchy edge highlight. It's fine if it isn't perfect on these models. They're rough, gross, well-worn zombies. They don't shine their armor. Also, sorry that this next clip is desperately out of focus. I missed a setting on my camera. Mistakes happen in all creative endeavors, and the important thing is learning from them. So if your goal is to paint to a tabletop standard for your models, this is a great place to leave these. They look pretty good, they're distinctive, and most importantly, when it comes to speed painting, it didn't take too long to get here. But just like with the Glorio Van Alten model in the last video, we are going to take these a step or two further. The first step in bringing some more interest to these models is using washes. I have red tone, purple tone, and strong tone from Army Painter. The red tone and purple tone I use on all the open sores on their flesh. I kind of choose where to put them randomly on the sores. The red is great for bloody areas, and the purple will make the undead flesh look bruised and decaying. I also make sure to get the red tone on the gums around their teeth and in the eye sockets to add some gruesome details. I get started with the strong tone by brushing it across the cuticles of their fingernails. It's a tiny detail, but it's going to help add to the general grubbiness and grossness of the model. From there, I start to brush it into the shadows and recesses of the coat. I don't do an all-over wash with it. Just deposit it in the folds of the jacket and brush it towards the bottom to help deepen the shadows towards the bottom of the model. Once that's dry, it's time to highlight the coat. To do that, I'll be using Pro Acryl's Burnt Orange and Citadel's Cadian Flesh Tone. I start by doing a chunky edge highlight on the coat in Burnt Orange. The slap chop method already gives us a pretty decent map for where the brightest spots are, so if you're unsure of where to place your highlights, just try to follow that. The other important part of increasing the contrast on the model is making sure to get these highlights right next to the shadows we just put in. Putting your highlights directly opposite your shadows is a great way to quickly increase your contrast. Once the entire coat has that edge highlight on it, I come back in with Cadian Flesh Tone for a smaller, much more selective edge highlight. I only put this at the very sharpest points and where two angles meet each other, like the folds of the coat meeting the hem, or where the rips in the coat meet. These are really just tiny points of light, but they do help bring us to our final result. There you go. So for 15 or 20 minutes extra work, you get a much better result. You get darker shadows, higher highlights, and you get some color variation with the reds and purples in the washes. Of course, if you want to, you could use the exact same principles and go over the rest of the model to bring the entire thing up a little bit. But this is where we're going to leave this one for today. Thank you for watching. Please hit like and subscribe. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.